Hi everyone, Dave here at East Rosebud Fly and Tackle in Billings, Montana. Today I'm going to tie a unique nymph for you. It's called a Wiggle Nymph. This was actually showcased by Swisher and Richards in their book Selective Trout. It's published in 1971. They lived in Michigan and they fished the Hexagenia hatch, which is a burrowing mayfly, has a 3-year life cycle. And the nymphs are about 2 inches long when they swim up to the surface, and they have this really cool undulating movement that really triggers the trout. So they developed this system for tying bigger nymphs. I'm going to actually tie a dragonfly nymph for you because it's such an adaptable and such an easy tie to make, and there's nothing has the movement like this fly. Now, damsels are popular on all flat waters, ponds, lakes. They like to live in the weeds, the vegetation. They typically emerge around midsummer, early to late morning. And damsels emerge by swimming underneath the surface of the water towards the shoreline to emerge. So they swim for a while, then they rest and they drop. They swim for a while, they rest and they drop. Well, the whole time their back end is wiggling, just like this Wiggle Nymph. So this is a very, very powerful fly to use during those times. After they've emerged on some vertical structure, they're called a teneral adult. It takes about 24 hours for their exoskeleton to harden enough where they can fly. And if there's any kind of a wind or anything, they're very easily blown into the water. Now, I also tie a pattern here, the micro damsel for the shop, both in tan for the female and blue for the male. Most of our damsels out here are called the bluette. I'm sure you've seen them. They're a bright blue color. They're very, very common. And fish, when they're emerging and migrating towards shore, really, really concentrate on these. So this is a great early summer fly. So I'm just taking this Wiggle Nymph pattern and adapting it to a damselfly. Charlie Craven actually covers this in one of his books. So I'm borrowing Charlie's materials here. All you really need, for the rear hook, you need a ring eye hook so that you get this free movement. And I'm just using a Komodo wide gap dry fly hook, but any ring eye hook, like a 101, TMC 101 will work. We're using size 14 hooks here. I'm going to connect it with some 3X fluorocarbon tippet. The front hook can be any 1X long nymph hook. I'm using the TMC 100 SPBL because it has a 1.5 wide hook gap. And the eyes are simply extra small bead chain eyes. So it doesn't take very many materials. The Marabou I'm going to use is the prime Marabou, the long feathers, not the blood quills. And I'll show you how we're going to wrap these. So we'll start off with our ring eye hook here. And again, you don't have to use any particular brand. You can use a small articulated shank. They're just so much more expensive than hooks, so I just prefer to go this way. What we're going to do is we're going to start out wrapping a thread base from behind the eye. I'm using Veevus 10-aught olive thread. I also tie this in the light olive, and for that I use a light Cahill thread, but you can use any color of Marabou that you like. And this pattern is adaptable to a lot of different materials. It's just that Marabou has that inherent movement in it. So a thread base down to the base of the shank. Now, you don't need a lot of fibers, 6 or 7 fibers, but you want to make sure they're the nice, full, bushy ones up towards the middle of the quill. I'm just going to peel these off, like so. If you have really, really fine tips, feel free to break them off and even them up. You don't ever want to cut Marabou. Just pinch it and break it. It looks a lot more natural. The tail is only going to be about a hook shank length here. 2 wraps at the very back. Use a pinch wrap. 1 wrap, set it. 2nd wrap, set it. And we're going to bring our Marabou out of the way, advance our thread right back behind the hook eye. Now, when you wrap this Marabou, you want to wrap it just like you do pheasant tail. You don't want to twist it. You want to flat wrap it. And you'll see the advantage of is you get the natural taper from these fibers. I'll just use both hands to control it. Don't allow it to twist. We're just covering the hook shank. And we're going to take this right up to the thread. Always bring your materials to your thread, never the other way around. If you bring your thread to your materials, they won't be tied down vertically. A couple of thread wraps right behind the eye. Tighten this up a little. Like so. And we clip the extra. So you can see by not twisting this marabou as you wrap it, you get a nice natural taper from this. Finally, we're just going to finish the thread off here, right behind the eye. Now, of course, the bend of this needs to be cut. Always make sure that it's pointed in a safe direction. Make sure that you've got it pointed towards your trash roll. If you lose this on the floor, or even worse in the carpeting, the surgeon might call it minor surgery, but when you get the bill, you probably think otherwise. You need a heavy-duty pair of side cutters. Cut it off as close to the tail material as you can. It's okay if you've got a little bit of nub there. Again, point it in a safe direction and clip it off. So there's our tail. All right, for the front hook, again, standard nymph hook works just fine. This is a TMC 100 SPBL. It's a 1X wide gap. Once again, I'm going to start the thread behind the eye and wrap a thread base. All right, for my connector, I'm just using some 3X fluorocarbon tippet. All you need is a couple of inches of it. Select fluorocarbon because it's of its strength and its abrasion resistance. Just going to thread this through our rear hook, like so. All right, and just make a loop of it. Very easy. You want the eye of your rear hook to be just inside the bend of your front hook. This way it doesn't collide with your front hook and it still has free movement. Again, using a pinch wrap. Wrap that down nice and tight. Well, we have a chance to perform a rescue. Most flies, in most situations, if you break your thread, simply put your hackle pliers on the broken thread. I'll restart our thread here. And then we'll restart our thread close to where it's broken. Make sure you cross over where your broken tag is so that you know it's secure, and then clip off both tags. There's very few situations in fly tying where broken thread is a real disaster. All right, so I'm going to continue to wrap over this about 3/4 of the way down the shank, and then clip off the excess. Now our dumbbell eyes. I'm going to stop about 1.5 eye length short of the eye. And this is extra small black bead chain. You could also use heavy mono and cut your own eyes. I do that frequently. But I really like the effects of this black eye on this thing. Get a hold of this guy. I'm going to start it with a couple of wraps. then a couple of cross wraps, and then back once or twice. You do not want to use head cement on this unless you're patient enough to let it dry, because it's going to wick into your marabou and you don't want that. After you've made your X wraps, come around underneath the beads and tighten it. This tightens those X wraps right against the hook shank. And we're simply going to bring our thread back and do the very same thing that we did on the rear tail. A few more pieces of marabou, and this is going to require a little more wrapping, a little more area to cover here, but the process is exactly the same. So strip off a few more of your prime marabou fibers. We want the tail to be just long enough to cover this extension and cover the eye of the other hook. Again, a pinch wrap, a second wrap on top to get it secured. Bring your thread forward, and we're going to stop in front of the bead. So cross over the bead and make a wrap in front of it. Parallel wrap it. Don't allow it to twist. That way we get that natural taper. You can't wrap this front hook real tightly because you'll run out of marabou. So when I come to the back of the bead, I'm coming up between the eyes, down behind the hook, around underneath. I'll get my fingers out of the way here in a second. And then over again on top of the eyes. So I've just made an X wrap around the eyes. 2 wraps of thread right behind the eye. Then we're going to come between the eyes and over in the back and make 1 wrap, about a bead length back. We're going to make a wing case out of the remaining marabou. A couple of thread wraps, tighten that down, whip finish it. And then we'll just trim the butts off of this marabou a little bit here. There you have it. It's a really, really simple fly to make. It's adaptable to any large nymph. Not hard to make. Takes 2 hooks, that's all. A little bit of bead chain, a little bit of marabou. So give it a try. And these flies will be available here in the shop for your summer fishing pleasure if you care to buy any. As always, thanks for joining in. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. I'll see you next time.